from Walt Whitman's preface to Leaves of Grass. And I know that Walt Whitman would be a huge proponent of the Green Amendment. Listen to his words. This is what you shall do. Love the earth and sun and the animals, despise riches, give alms to everyone that asks, stand up for the stupid and crazy, devote your income and labor to others, hate tyrants, argue not concerning God, have patience and indulgence toward the people, take off your hat to nothing known or unknown or to any person or number of people, go freely with powerful, uneducated persons and with the young and with the mothers of families. Read these leaves in the open air every season of every year of your life. Re-examine all you have been told at church or school or in any book. Dismiss whatever insults your own soul, and your very flesh shall be a great poem and have the richest fluency, not only in its words, but in the silent lines of its lips and face and between the lashes of your eyes and in every motion and joint of your body. So we thank Walt Whitman for opening us up.
That's
and
beautiful.
We're so excited to have you all with us tonight. And I'm going to have Consuelo Ochoa de Walker introduce our speaker, Maya Van Rossum.
Thank you very much, Courtenay. I hope I'm pronouncing it well.
That is pronouncing it well, yes.
Okay. Well, it is my honor to present to you Maya. Maya has a wonderful setup and writing in the registration site. So I'm going to talk about what I know about her personally. I met Maya like 3 years ago, advocating at the legislature in New Mexico for the environmental issues and the Green Amendment in this case. And she's like a jewel. She knows everybody that is to be known in the legislature. She knows the legislatures, she knows the movers, she knows the heads of leaders of every group, like the Sierra Club, the environmental groups, writers, and lawyers, of course. And she also knows leaders in the movement in New Mexico. But she also does that in other states all over the country. So you are making history, Maya. And you have a dog, right? And a daughter.
Yeah.
That is side by side with you and helps you all the way. So that speaks wonders about you.
Oh.
And I'm very happy to just have this little bit of introduction for you.
Oh.
Okay.
Thank you, Consuelo. It's such a joy to work with Consuelo in New Mexico. You all know her. She's just like a beautiful, beautiful soul, right? And it just, her care and her love for everyone and everything just shines through. So it's a real honor to work with you, Consuelo, and to have you say such nice things about me.
Oh, gracias.
Not many people say nice things about me. No. So I really appreciate that. So I'm just going to jump in. I will start with my screen share and let me go to play from start. Oh, that little line's in my way. Slideshow, play from start. Great. There we go. All set? Great. Okay. So, it really is a joy and an honor to be here. Consuelo said such nice things about me, but to give you a little bit about my biography for purposes of the amendment, I have, for the last 30 plus years, had the honor of serving as the Delaware Riverkeeper. and leader of a 4-state advocacy and litigation organization called the Delaware Riverkeeper Network. And I and my team work throughout the entire Delaware River watershed, including portions of New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, literally fighting the good fight for the beautiful Delaware River. I'm still the Delaware Riverkeeper. I still lead the organization. But during the course of my work, I have also come to found this new national organization and movement called Green Amendments for the Generations, which is what we're going to talk about today. So I'm not going to not going to undercut my own headline, but you know, this new pathway for protection that I'm here to talk about is really an outgrowth of my environmental activism and litigation, and experiencing the myriad of ways our current system of environmental protection laws fundamentally fails to protect us. And at the same time, experiencing the power of the Green Amendment pathway for environmental protection. I'm not going to tell the whole story about the founding of the movement. That's in the book, and that's another version of the talk. But I will mention it a little bit later on when we talk about how Green Amendments make a difference.
Mhm.
But I want you to know that this is not just sort of some fly-by-night idea. This is really grounded in work and success and experience. So right now, especially with so much happening in the world, people really are struggling to find what is the pathway we should pursue to protect our environment for ourselves, to protect our environment for children, to protect environment for children yet to be born. People want to know what we need to do. And they want to know because they're looking at the reality of what's happening in the world. And we can see that people are really being devastated by environmental pollution, degradation, and harm, right? Breathing polluted air, drinking contaminated water, species are being brought to the brink of extinction and over the edge. And so many harms are being foisted upon our communities, upon our environment, and the beautiful natural world that we cherish and with whom we share this earth. And people want to know why. And in my work as an environmental activist, but also an attorney, people ask me, like, how is it possible, Maya, that we can be facing so many problems? We have so many laws, right? And agencies and policies and programs that are all supposed to be about protecting our environment. I thought we were protected. So like, what's going on? And the thing is, the reality is yes, we do have literally hundreds of thousands of environmental protection laws, if you look at the local level, the state level, the federal level. But the fact of the matter is the way these laws are written, the way our system of governance operates when it comes to the environment, it's all improperly wrong. It's really wrongly oriented. Mm-hmm. So our system of laws in the United States of America, no matter what state you're in, is really focused on legalizing environmental pollution, degradation, and harm. The law presupposes that pollution and degradation and harm is a foregone conclusion, is a necessary evil, is something that we are going to allow to happen. And as long as you go to the right agencies and get the right reviews and the right permits, you're golden, because we're gonna oversee the harm that you are inflicting on our communities and our environment. We are not going to start from the proposition that pollution, degradation, and harm may be unnecessary, may be avoidable, is something to be prevented, not simply accepted and managed. And it is a system of laws and governance that's filled with gaps and loopholes. There are many things when it comes to the environment that evade legislation and regulation. If we think about forever chemicals, PFAS, PFOA, PFOS, right? That people have been hearing so much about. One of the reasons why forever chemicals were allowed to get into the environment in such persistent and pervasive ways and literally into our bodies is because for decades and decades and decades, there was a total absence of legislation or regulation. There were no laws to stop industry or the Army from using forever chemicals in the ways they were using it. And so therefore it was allowed to happen. Even now, the legislation and regulation is very limited. There's also in this system of laws, right, there are lots of loopholes that are intentionally written in, right? Loopholes, for example, for the fossil fuel industry, so they can evade drinking water protections that apply to every other, industry, but won't apply to fossil fuel industry in certain contexts. So we have gaps, we have loopholes, we have a lot of things that simply are not addressed for one reason or another under this system of laws. It is also a system of laws where environmental racism and inequity is literally built in. We do not have communities of color and indigenous communities and low-income communities being unfairly burdened by environmental pollution, degradation, and harm in spite of the laws we have in place. We have these inequitable impacts because of the laws, because of how they are written, interpreted, and applied, right? Racism is just part and parcel of the whole thing. And it's a problem, right? It's a problem that perpetuates. While we hear a lot about the importance of protecting children, about how children's little bodies are more impacted by pollution and degradation at lower levels, how children need exposure to healthy environment to help them nurture their bodies and their minds and their souls and to help them grow. We hear a lot of great rhetoric about children, but when you actually look at the laws, we don't actually see an enhanced level of protection to meet this this enhanced level of protection that the children need, right? Lower levels of we won't go there. Children are not properly protected under this system. Again, a lot of rhetoric, but in reality, we don't actually see the protection that they need. In this system of laws and governance, legislators and regulators are really the ones who decide. In the final analysis, when they're looking at the laws that they've written, they're interpreting, they're applying, they're the ones who decide how clean is clean. And industry has much greater access to the levers of power, to those who are writing these laws, interpreting these laws, enforcing these laws, or deciding not to enforce these laws. We, the people, don't actually have that kind of access. And that's one of the reasons why you have the gaps and the loopholes and the environmental racism and the failure to protect children, because too often that benefits somebody who's going to make a profit off of the pollution and the degradation that's going to result. And of course, now we have a new sense of urgency. You know, historically, when it comes to environmental protection, there's a real division of labor. The law is intentionally written so that the federal government has power and the state governments have power. And the way it works is that the federal government sets the floor of protection, that basic minimum level of protection that all people should be entitled to. It may not be high enough, but it's better than nothing, right? And the states are allowed to be more protective above that limit. But right now, that federal floor is being stripped away. So people can't even count on that basic modicum of protection that historically they were entitled to because of the rollbacks that are happening at the federal level under the current administration. And so as a result, we have more and more people who are suffering, more and more people who are worried. They're worried about their present, they're worried about their future, and they want to know what they should be doing about it. And I, as an environmental activist, am very, very clear. We need to be doing everything. I am not here to tell you there's one pathway. I am here to be very clear. We need to continue to organize and advocate and educate and protest and testify and litigate and vote good people to office. But while we're doing all of this important work together, we also need to be transforming our system of laws and governance so that when we're doing all of these good things, we are better positioned for success. It is one thing to litigate and enforce a law that's not protective enough when it comes to the environment. It is quite another thing to litigate for a much higher level of protection that one can be entitled to, right? And so what we are looking to do with the Green Amendment movement, what I'm here to talk to you about is how do we transform our system of laws and governance so we are all entitled to a higher level of protection. So when we do all of those good works, and we get to the end of the process, we are in fact going to be better protected because we, the people, have real power and we truly are entitled to a clean and healthy environment. What we need to do is we need to reorient government so it actually is focused on prevention of harm first, so that people have real power when our government officials fundamentally fail to protect us. And how do we do these things? We do these things through what I call the passage of a Green Amendment, right? That's what our Green Amendment movement is all about. The way we accomplish this writ large, transformational across all aspects of environmental protection and across all communities and frankly, all generations, is that we create a constitutional entitlement that lift up our environmental rights, our rights to clean air and clean water, a safe climate and healthy environments, lift them up and give them the same highest constitutional recognition, protection, and standing as all the other fundamental rights we hold dear. We all know how powerfully our rights to free speech and freedom of religion, our rights to bear arms are protected because of the constitutional language and placement that they are entitled to or that they are the result of. Well, if we want our environmental rights to have that same highest level of protection and power, we need to give our environmental rights the same quality of constitutional protection that we give to these other fundamental freedoms. And that's what a Green Amendment does. If you want to lift up our environmental rights so they are given that highest constitutional standing, not just any language will do. Right? We hear a lot about environmental rights amendments, environmental rights. But if you really want to have your environmental rights have true meaning and power, there are certain criteria and qualities in the constitutional language that you need to achieve in order to give environmental rights the same highest standing as those other fundamental rights. And I want to be clear, like when I'm talking about environmental rights and putting them on par with the right to free speech and these other fundamental rights, I am not saying our environmental rights should be given better protection. I'm not saying they should be given worse protection. I'm saying they should be given the same level of constitutional protection we give to the other fundamental freedoms. A Green Amendment really is a special kind of environmental rights amendment. It is language that gets placed in the Declaration of Rights section of the Constitution, meeting certain criteria and having certain qualities that ensure that environmental rights get that highest constitutional standing. That Declaration of Rights or Bill of Rights placement that I highlight here is really, really important. Because if we want our environmental rights to have the same highest standing as those other fundamental rights, we need to put them in the same section of the Constitution, and then again, have the right kind and quality of language. If we do this, if we use the right language with the right placement that meets the definition of a Green Amendment, what do we actually accomplish? Well, we do give highest legal standing to our environmental rights in a really powerful and enforceable way. We ensure that all people have an actual substantive right to a clean, safe, and healthy environment. And we are clear about what that means. Essentials of life, clean water, clean air, a safe climate, and healthy environments. We are recognizing that environmental rights are human rights. They're not rights that have been given by our government, and therefore they're not rights that can be taken from our government. They are not simply a policy statement. They are not simply to be defined by whatever the legislators or government officials feel they should be defined by. These are inherent, inalienable human rights that belong to us, we the people, and are entitled to that highest level of respect and protection. With the Green Amendment, all government officials at every level of government, from the local town council to the state legislature and all the regulatory agencies in between, are constitutionally obliged to protect the environmental rights of all the people. And they have to protect those rights equitably. No longer can we have environmental sacrifice zones so that we burden communities of color and low-income communities and indigenous communities so everybody else can be better off. When that starts to happen, when we can demonstrate that that's happening, then we may have a constitutional question that we can bring to bear to secure that equitable protection that everybody is entitled to. With a Green Amendment in place, we fill the gap. So if there is no law that's going to protect our right to clean water or clean air in one context or another, we can actually just turn to the constitutional language. I have a right to clean water. You government official have a duty to protect my right to clean water. No law that defines it in one context or another. Bummer. I have the right. So it actually, the language is enforceable in its own right. You know what it means. You have a right to free speech. If you think your right to free speech is being infringed upon, you can turn to the Constitution to vindicate that right. With the Green Amendment, you can do the same, even if there's an absence of law in one context or another. With Green Amendments, protection of our climate, protection of future generations, these become constitutional mandates. This isn't just pretty language or a pretty concept or something that we hope for or that we beg government officials to do. These are now constitutional entitlements that are actually enforceable. Green Amendments create a clear obligation on all government officials to protect the natural resources of their state, and they become constitutionally obliged to protect those resources for the benefit of people. People are the priority, not profits, not politicians. It's we, the people. And when our government officials fundamentally fail us, when the laws as written, interpreted, or applied fundamentally fail to protect our environment or our environmental rights, we, the people, can do something about it because it's our entitlement and it is enforceable in the courts. When we get green amendments, we really do transform the legal landscape. We do reorient government to be focused on prevention first. All the laws that are already on the books, they're not just wiped away. They're now strengthened because all of those laws get interpreted and applied through the lens of how do those laws help protect environmental rights. When there's a gap in the law, we can use the amendment to fill that gap until some good government official does the hard work of putting in place a new critical protection that we need. So it becomes a foundation for new protections while filling the gap until those new protections are secured. And it's not just about the law. It's not just about transforming the law, although that is so powerful, but it's also about empowering advocates and advocacy, because now when each and every one of us goes forth to advocate for the people in the earth we love, we're not just fighting for the people in the earth we love. We are fighting for a constitutional right that belongs to us. And here in the United States of America, whether people agree with you or disagree with you, if you're fighting for a constitutional right, they look at you differently, they respect you, they listen harder, they pay more attention. Because it is actually an enforceable entitlement. And that makes a difference. It makes a difference in how you get viewed when you're advocating in the room. But more important than that, for advocates themselves, it is incredibly intellectually and emotionally empowering to be fighting for a constitutional right while you are fighting for the beautiful nature and people that you love. Every time advocates go forth, they can now say, I have a right, and it actually means something. If you are in a state where there is no Green Amendment, you can go forth and say, I have a right to clean air, and you may actually have a human right to clean air. But because you don't have a constitutional right, because you don't have a legal right, you can't actually enforce that right. So it's powerful language that doesn't make a difference. But when you have a constitutional Green Amendment and you say, I have a right, it is a right you have in your heart, it is a right you have in your mind, and it's a right that you have under the Constitution. So it transforms the landscape. And now every government official, they can no longer, when you get up to testify about the environment, they can't sit back and fold their arms and be bored and do their text messages, because now they know that they're constitutionally obliged to protect your environmental rights. So government officials sit up and they listen better, right? More firmly, more respectfully, because they know they are accountable to you on that constitutional level. One of the beautiful things about a Green Amendment, right? We spend so much time as environmental advocates fighting against things, fighting against the development or the fossil fuel industry. But when it comes to a Green Amendment, we're fighting for something. We're fighting for something incredibly beautiful: the right of present and future generations to a clean, safe, and healthy environment. This is a nationwide movement. We are going state by state by state, seeking and securing the passage of constitutional Green Amendments. And when we hit the right moment, the right tipping point, we are also going to seek a federal Green Amendment. We need Green Amendments at both levels of government. We need to be holding our federal government officials accountable, but we also need to be holding our state government officials accountable. And remember what I said, states can do better when it comes to the environment. So starting with the states is so incredibly powerful and important, especially at this time when the federal minimum protections are being pulled away. When I began the Green Amendment movement, there was only a Green Amendment in existence in Pennsylvania and Montana. But now we have a Green Amendment also in the state of New York, with over 20 other states where proposals have been put forth, and half a dozen more states on the way. This is an example. I thought, this was my last minute. Let me show you what some Green Amendment language looks like. This is actually Pennsylvania's amendment. The people have a right to clean air and pure water. And the government has a duty to protect the state's natural resources for present and future generations. This is the New Mexico Green Amendment proposal that Consuelo and I have been fighting for. There's some additional robustness and clarity. We've added healthy native flora, fauna, and ecosystems. We're very clear that it includes the climate. This is Wisconsin's. Has these critical elements about protecting future generations, and we're clear about the environments that we're protecting, but we've added healthy soils. And here's North Carolina, which I added too, because somebody from North Carolina is on the call. And so this is North Carolina's proposal just put forth. And, you know, beautiful thing about North Carolina's proposal, this is, as we have in a number of other states, but North Carolina's proposal is bipartisan. There are 2 Dems and 2 Republicans, both of whom have put this language forth. And we see here, you know, that there's talk about coastal lands and wetlands as well as open lands. What you'll see about all these amendments is they're all a little bit different because every state is different, right? And so green amendments are not cookie cutter. I work with the grassroots and the legislators to develop amendment language that's right for that state. Does it really make a difference to have a green amendment? It sure does. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, this is sort of the origin story. Fracking for fossil fuels was devastating Pennsylvania communities. And yet the frackers wanted to, you know, do even more. They wanted to find a way to make it even easier for themselves to have their way with Pennsylvania communities and environments. And so literally, leaders from the fracking industry went behind closed doors and they wrote for themselves a law that was called Act 13. Act 13 was passed by the Pennsylvania legislature and signed by the governor. Act 13 preempted local zoning authority and actually mandated that operating, drilling, and fracking well pads be allowed to be located as close as 300 feet from people's homes, as well as wastewater pits. It alleviated the frackers of the obligation to notify those on private drinking water wells that their drinking water had become potentially contaminated by fracking operations. It removed minimum environmental protection standards that would apply to every other industry, but not the frackers. In my role as the Delaware Riverkeeper, this law was passed in 2012. In my role as the Delaware Riverkeeper, when this law was passed, I knew that we had to challenge it. The thing is, how do you pass a piece of legislation passed by the legislators and signed by the governor? Like, how can you win? If the law's not on your side, right, you can protest, you can try to get the legislators to repeal it, you know, to change it, to modify it. Those things were not going to work. This law had just been passed by the Pennsylvania legislature. So we knew we needed to have a higher power and actually reflected and recognized that in Pennsylvania's Declaration of Rights was this long ignored constitutional right of the people to pure water, clean air, and a healthy environment. The language had been in the state constitution for 42 years by this point, but it had been declared to be just a policy statement by the courts, and so didn't really provide any enhanced protection. When this law got passed, I and my team thought, you know what, this law is so egregious, maybe we could get the courts to reconsider that Pennsylvania language. And the long and the short of it is, we defeated the provisions of this law that were of concern before they ever got implemented. So all the wealth of harms that would have resulted from the kinds of provisions I just described to you were never allowed to advance because we stopped the law in its tracks because we had this constitutional right. That was the founding of the Green Amendment movement. Upon this victory was when I recognized we needed to have this kind of protection in every single state constitution across our nation, and found that only Montana had something similar. Montana's amendment also used to incredible effect. For those who have heard of the Held v. Montana case, where 16 youth defeated a state law, right, that prohibited government officials from considering the climate changing ramifications of their actions and decisions. Our Children's Trust organization is awesome. They do so much great stuff. But when you look at their cases that are grounded in constitutional language, all of them have failed when they've gotten into the courts, except for this case. And that's because this case was grounded in Green Amendment language. In Pennsylvania, we've used the amendment to secure cleanup of a long ignored, supersaturated toxic site. In Montana, the amendment has been used to protect critical ecosystems from devastating industrial gold mining operations. Right now, New York's amendment is being used by an environmental justice community to try to protect them from devastating violations resulting under New York state law, where the government is not properly responding, or at least not responding in a way protective of those communities. And the amendment's being used to protect precious natural open space that would otherwise be lost. Right now in Pennsylvania, we're trying to use the amendment or demonstrate that the amendment has a powerful effect in the context of data centers, right? This is like the new industry that's proliferating in states like Pennsylvania and just running roughshod over our environments and over our communities. And there's really very little that exists under state law, and anything under federal law is being stripped away by executive order. And so, what are communities to do? Well, we're working to demonstrate in Pennsylvania that if you have a Green Amendment, you have a powerful level of protection that otherwise wouldn't exist. We are in a historic moment when our democracy is being sorely undermined, but so too is our environment. And people really want to know what can we do? And I think that when it comes to the environment and when it comes to using our democracy to show the power of people to advance critical protections at this critical time, that our Green Amendment movement is perfectly poised to make this demonstration. We are using the power of our democracy to take back our state constitutions, to make clear to our state government officials that you are constitutionally obliged to protect our environmental rights. It's a powerful, beautiful thing. We don't have to sit down and shut up when it comes to the environment. We can actually make real progress in this difficult moment with our Green Amendment movement. So there is a book. If you were to buy the book, all the proceeds go to the Green Amendment movement. Not a penny comes back to me. The book did get some nice awards and accolades. And there's an organization, and membership is free. Nobody should have to pay to have a voice in the environment. So if you want to stay involved, interested, and informed, I hope you'll go to the website and join for free. And with that, I will stop my share. Sorry for the early stumbles. This is my second talk of the night. I hopped from one talk to another, so.
So Maya, thank you. You did not lack for enthusiasm. You were able to maintain your enthusiasm through 2 talks, and we're grateful for that. We're going to take some questions. You can put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand, and it's even best if you go down to reactions and put a raised hand up. That way you move to the front of the queue. And I'm going to start with a question. So there's the Green Amendment. Do you think that's all encompassing enough? Or do you think that granting personhood to different environmental areas like bodies of water, parcels of land, is something that is significant as well?
So I certainly believe in rights of nature, very much, but a couple of things. So first off, I believe that when you better protect the environment for we the people, every facet of nature gets better protected. And the reality is our system of laws, environment or otherwise, is really oriented towards protecting people. It's not oriented towards recognizing the rights of a river to walk into a courtroom right, and enforce the laws on its own. And so there have been efforts to bring cases on behalf of nature, and they fundamentally, right, they get dismissed because our law is not structured that way. So what we are doing with the Green Amendment movement is we are recognizing the importance of protecting nature for the benefit of people. And in so doing, we are protecting nature for the benefit of nature. And we are giving highest legal standing in a way that provides powerful benefits to people and nature. The rights of nature movement really is about nature being able to go into the courtroom and enforce existing laws. But as I say to people, if existing laws suck and they say that nature can be decimated and devastated for political or profit gain, then it doesn't really matter if nature is enforcing the law or people is enforcing the law. Nature still loses, right? So the Green Amendment movement is about raising the bar for protection. So again, both people and nature are benefited. And one other final observation, it is, it's really a strategic question. All of us believe in the rights of people. A whole bunch of people do not believe in the rights of nature. And so if you add the rights of nature to your Green Amendment language, you are really creating a high bar of opposition. And so I think that, to me, strategically, what makes sense, because we do get so much benefit for nature through the Green Amendment movement, let's start by raising the bar when it comes to protecting nature through the lens of the rights of people. And when we get people rethinking about environmental protection as an entitlement that belongs to us, not to government, and really transform the conversation and the law in that way, we'll be in a better position to later pursue the rights of nature, right? So to me, it's a two-step process that's really powerful. And it makes sense the way our laws are structured. We're just not structured around rights of nature. We are very much structured around rights of people.
Thank you. So I'm going to call on David Kempley, and then there are 2 questions in the chat that I'll follow up with. David? You need to unmute, David.
All right, I'll try again. I'm unmuted.
There you go. That's good.
Excellent talk, Maya. I admire your enthusiasm, particularly in difficult times. Shall we say it that way? That's nice. That's a nice way to put it. Disastrous times, perhaps. Well, okay, so here's my question. As part of the language that you fired up on the screen, you put down, you had self-executing. What could that mean?
Great question. So it's one of the most, like when I talk about a Green Amendment, there are environmental rights amendments, and then there are Green Amendments. There are lots and lots and lots of environmental rights amendments that have made very little difference. Green Amendments all make powerful change. And one of the essential elements for an environmental rights amendment to be a Green Amendment is that it must be self-executing, which means the language is enforceable in its own right. You can enforce directly the right to clean water or clean air, even if you don't have a law that addresses that issue in a particular context. So imagine forever chemicals, right? Forever chemicals, there were no laws regulating the use of forever chemicals by industry or by the Department of Defense. And so that's why they were allowed to run roughshod over our communities and our environment. But had there been enforceable Green Amendments in place at the time that these forever chemicals were proliferating, when it became clear that they were harmful, impacted communities could have gone to their regulators or legislators or government officials or the courts and said, listen, there may not be a law that prevents the use of forever chemicals in a way that's getting into my drinking water, but there is the Constitution, and I have a right to clean water. And this governmental agency issuing a permit allowing this industry to use these forever chemicals in ways that are getting into my drinking water and into my body, that's a violation of my constitutional right. So you can turn to the language itself and enforce it, even if you don't have a specific law to address it. Does that help?
It does. Thank you very much. It was a legal term that I was unfamiliar with. Thanks so much.
Very important term. It's one of the reasons why we could defeat Act 13, and in the Hell v. Montana case, they could defeat the Montana legislation, because the language can be used then, because it's self-executing and enforceable in its own right. When government passes a law that fails to protect environmental rights, it can be challenged because the Constitution is the higher power. It's self-executing, it's enforceable in its own right. It's not simply defined by the legislators. If it were simply defined by the legislators, which many environmental rights amendments specifically are, you can't challenge them, because the constitutional language says the people have a right to clean water as defined by the legislators. So if the legislators pass a law that says clean water is water so toxic it gives kids cancer, well, the constitutional right of the people to have legislators legislate happened, and there's nothing people can do about it because they gave all the power to the legislators, right? So it's that higher authority makes all the difference.
Thanks, David. Good question. Joyce Zook from Salem, Oregon said, I see that Oregon is green on your map, so you put up a map, but believe that the Green Amendment is not yet a part of our state constitution. Could you clarify? There are groups working to bring this amendment for voters to decide next spring.
Yes, so I'm very active with the Oregon movement and effort, and I've been working with Senator Gold since before the current movement was advancing. So, and I'm honored to be a part of that effort. What you'll notice on the map, right, is the Green Amendment states, Pennsylvania, Montana, and New York, are in dark green. Light green are all the states where language has been proposed, but not yet passed. Yellow states are the states where there's interest, but we don't yet have an official proposal. So in Oregon, there's a proposal, but it's in the works.
Thank you. Joyce, thanks for that question. And Barbara Recker says, how do you work on the state level? Do you have state level organizations?
So, one of my greatest mind-blowing challenges is that as powerful as this movement is, and as much as anybody who knows anything about environmental advocacy and law recognizes the power of this movement, including the people on this call, the philanthropic community has not been stepping up to support it. And so I have a very small operation. It should be much bigger. There should be chapters in every state, but we just don't have the resources to operate that way. So the way we really operate, and it's the movement evolve this way from the get-go because this is how it has to happen. I just wish I had better resources to support all of my state partners, but it works. What I do is I work with communities within that state. Sometimes it's an organization, sometimes it's legislators. A lot of times it's just regular people who really see the power of this and come together in coalition with me, and we meet weekly and we talk strategy and we do the work of figuring out the pathway forward, and then we pursue it. That's part of what I do with Consuelo in New Mexico. Our New Mexico legislative, our grassroots champions, we meet regularly and we develop the path and vision ourselves, and then we pursue it. And in every state, what that looks like is a little bit different. So I wish I had, something a little bit more robust in every state. I think when you talk about state level organizations, but the way I do it is by working with the people within that state. And the truth is, legislators in New Mexico don't care what I think. They care what Consuelo thinks.
Mm-hmm.
So by working with Consuelo and the other advocates in New Mexico, we create a much more powerful foundation for success. And we give true leadership to the organizations and the individuals within that state, who are the ones who really should have the power because it's their constitution.
Thank you. And then Barbara asked a follow-up question, which I think you have answered, about the possibility of incorporating legal recognition of rights for organizations, important institutions like families, schools, and churches, and not just individuals and states. But what you're talking about is putting the onus on the highest level Maya, right? Not on the legislators, you said, when you answered your question before, but placing the,
Well, the way I read Barbara's question is, it sounds like
Okay.
Barbara wants us not to just give the right to people, but to give the right to families and to churches and to schools. And I don't, that's not the way our Constitution operates, Barbara, right? When we look at it, we the people have the right to free speech. We the people have the right to freedom of religion. Now, when those rights are infringed upon individually or as part of our community, if our church community were to lose the right to clean water in one context or another, well, we could band together to enforce that right. It's still a right that belongs to we the people. But we're coming together in community to enforce that right. But I wouldn't want to start giving rights to entities. That brings us back to the problem that, corporations are considered to be people. Now, often corporations are considered to be people. And so, if a corporation finds that their rights are being infringed upon, in some contexts, they too can bring a legal action. On the other hand, like, I was sort of saying previously, as long as we're talking about protecting the environment for the benefit of all of us and raising that bar of protection for all of us, it's even if it is an entity like an organization that pursues the entitlement, the net benefit is to everyone, right? But it's still people who are, so like my organization, the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, when we enforced Pennsylvania's Environmental Rights Amendment, the Delaware Riverkeeper Network brought the litigation, but on behalf of our members who were the people who are being impacted. So I don't think you need to do what you're talking about. And I think that that would raise could set a very dangerous precedent that could play out in ways that we would not want to see happen in other contexts if it wasn't a church, but some other kind of entity, for example, that got the entitlement.
Thank you. Thanks, Maya, for looking at that. David Kempley, who's from Virginia, followed up with where can we get a boilerplate language for a green amendment for Virginia?
So if you go to the resources page of greenamendment.org, I have a step-by-step toolkit for how to build a green amendment. But the biggest thing that you will see in there is what I really urge, David, is let me help you do it. Get the toolkit, read it, get some sense, but let's work together because it's very simple, but it's also very complicated at the same time. And it's really value added if I can be a partner in the effort so that when questions or concerns come up from other grassroots advocates, and you may be surprised the questions they ask, or from legislators or the opposition, I can help you navigate the misinformation and also help you identify the varying options that will get you to the best outcome, but may help address different kinds of questions and concerns that will come up along the journey. So you can go find that on the resources page, but I really, really, really urge you, get in touch with me. I'll put my email in the chat and let me help you. You can be the lead, but I want to be one of your partners.
Great, thanks. I'm putting the link to the greenamendment.org in the chat.
Awesome.
You want to talk?
Judy from South Carolina says, I live in a gray state. Will your book give us steps to move forward with a small group of folks without legal support to make the amendment happen?
Judy, yes. And same thing as I said to David, send me an email and let me help you. Let's work together. Sometimes my role is greater, sometimes it's lesser. It depends on the state, but it really always is value added because I can bring to bear the knowledge. I can help with the education and the training. I bring, help create state-specific resources and talking points. Once we have your language, we can work to get a website. Every website, like there's a certain approach I use that lets me do it pretty cost efficiently. So, and if you want to see an example of that, if you go to nmgreenamendment.org, you'll see what New Mexico's website looks like. And we'll then be able to create one for South Carolina, and that'll be scgreenamendment.org. So get in touch, and I'd love to work with you too, Judy. Again, my email's in the chat.
Thanks, Maya. I actually have a question about Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania has a green amendment, and Pennsylvania has been decimated by fracking. So how was that allowed to happen with a green amendment in place?
So the thing is, with Pennsylvania's story, like I said, the fracking came to Pennsylvania in the mid 2000s. I didn't say that, but fracking came to Pennsylvania in the mid 2000s. And, the fracking operations were operating away. And in 1971, that's when Pennsylvania's language got placed into the Constitution. But almost as soon as it got placed into the Constitution, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court declared it to be just a statement of policy. So robbed it of all its legal strength. So you had this great language on the books, but it didn't make a difference. And it was during this period, like actually when that decision came down, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at the time disagreed with the decision and said that the decision had disemboweled Pennsylvania's constitutional language. That's how powerful the undermining, the robbing of the right was in the eyes of the then Chief Justice. And so it was during this time when you had great language that had been disemboweled that the frackers came to Pennsylvania. Then in 2012 was when this Act 13 was passed. And then you heard a little bit about that story, and we overturned it and prevented the exponential expansion of the fracking industry that would have resulted if that law had been allowed to stay in place. And so it's almost as if Pennsylvania's Green Amendment was only passed in December 2013. So the frackers were already there. And we are now in this position of having to gain back ground, make clear what the amendment means in different contexts, including the fracking context. I believe if Pennsylvania had a green amendment that was alive and well before the frackers came to the state, we would have a dramatically different story than we have now. But as it is, the frackers came first. So the playing field changed. Like if you imagine South Carolina or Virginia, right? If the Green Amendment gets passed, or Oregon, if the Green Amendment gets passed right now today, all the bad stuff that's happening won't instantly disappear. We will now have the right, we will now have this powerful tool that we can work with to make things better, to prevent new harms, but we'll have to do the work because the bad stuff is already there. So that's part of Pennsylvania's unfortunate story. I'm hoping that we can have a different quality of history when it comes to data centers.
Oh, okay. Great. Thanks. Consuelo, did you want to talk a little bit about New Mexico's role and your role in working in New Mexico to work toward a green amendment?
Well, I sort of work on the side, but mainly through the church. 3 years ago, 2 years ago, we signed up, well, 3 and 2 years ago, we signed a petition to support the Green Amendment for the legislatures. And our church, my church in Santa Fe, signed for all of this. Then I'm part of the presbytery of the north part of the state. So everybody in the presbytery meetings, I presented the Green Amendment to everybody, and they read it and they signed the petition. I copied this petition to the legislatures that were in favor of it and presenting it, and that worked. However, we do have a network all over the state. We do not have a chapter per se of the Green Amendment. And I think that is the next step to make. And inviting Maya this time, I'm working again through the church, because I think the Presbyterian Church is one of the few churches that is out there. That is not quietly, yielding to old-fashioned beliefs that have nothing to do with the right of people to live in a human way in our home. You know, the earth is our home. We have no other home, and our sky is our roof. So we have to protect it. But it takes a lot of work. We've been working on this for 5 years now. Last year, we were very happy. It was approved at one level, but not brought up in the second level. So that put us back, but not really. After 5 years of working on it and finally getting an approval was a step forward. So we go little by little. And what I tell people is sort of like when we women were fighting for voting rights, it took a long time and it was a small group dedicated to do it. Of course, the history at the time was different, and then the minorities women had to fight for it too, but it works now. But we also have to think that the gun industry all the time is calling on to the Constitution of our right to bear arms. So we have to look at the Green Amendment like that. Something we have to always call for as a right that we have in the United States, all over the world, really. There are movements all over the world now. And when it comes to fracking, every year it comes up, and this year it got defeated. Even though the governor, for some strange reason, was in favor of it, or using fracking again and putting it in the ground, the legislative body and everybody said no, and all the environmental groups. We also network with all the environmental groups we can, and with environmental groups from in this case, the Democratic Party.
Consuelo, we are grateful for the work that you're doing in New Mexico and for explaining a little bit about how that works. Thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to wrap up. Sue asked about, we're in the process of creating a green team, and I think her green team should get in touch with you, Maya, so that you can work with them.
Absolutely. we actually have a lot of faith communities taking on leadership roles in a variety of different states. So Sue, you saw my email.
That's great. Maya, this has been so interesting and so terrific, and we are grateful. Mindy, do we have a couple of slides to throw up at the end here?
Okay, let me pull up my slides here. Okay.
So one of the things I want to encourage you all to do, it is the in-person sign up is closed for our conference in Little Rock, Arkansas, but the virtual availability is still open. Please sign up and join us virtually. You have access to all the lectures and worship services and keynote speakers and our international panel for Sacred Creation, Justice Flows Down Like Water, Earth Care Conference. So we look forward to welcoming you to that. And you can take a picture of the QR code and register. Thanks. We've got a book study coming up the end of October. Just Kitchen, Invitations to Sustainability, Cooking Connection, and Celebration. And both authors, Derek Weston and Anne Woofenden, are going to be there to talk about the work of putting this book together and to answer your questions. So we encourage you to buy the book and read it, but you don't have to. You can just show up. And one of our steering committee members, the Reverend Dr. Shannon Vance Campo, is going to present a webinar on connecting with your ecological self. And this is in anticipation of a series that's going to take place in 2026 for ordained leaders, for lay leaders and pastors. who are interested in learning more about ecology and theology. You can always make a donation to PEC. We're a volunteer organization with the exception of Mindy, who holds us together, and our bookkeeper who keeps track of your donations. So if you would please contribute to PNC, we would be grateful. Thank you all for being here, Maya. Thank you again. You were wonderful, wonderful. And it's exciting that people are doing the work you're doing. It's more important now than ever, friends. I'm just going to close us with a quick prayer. Let's pray. Creator God, you are in all and through all, and we are your grateful people. Help us to find ways to respond, especially in these challenging times, so that we might support your beautiful world. We pray all this in your name. Amen. Thank you,
Amen.
friends.